Welcome to the Faith is Not Blind podcast. I'm Eric Devonier, and today we're here with Logan. Welcome, Logan.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. Logan, I'm wondering if you can take just a couple minutes and tell us some background about yourself.
Yeah. So, like you said, my name is Logan. I'm from the Bay Area, California, from San Jose. I grew up, I was born kind of in a small town called Morgan Hill, out by Gilroy, and then moved over to Saratoga, just another suburb of San Jose, when I was about 7. I grew up in the church. Both my parents were active members. My dad converted when he married my mom in their 30s, and my mother converted when she was a young girl. So.
Oh, well, yeah. So they're both converts, and then you were born and raised in the church then?
Yeah.
And so what was it like growing up for you in your home and in connection with the church?
Yeah. So, you know, I think I grew up kind of a typical LDS boy, you know.
Yeah.
Baptized when I was 8, went to Cub Scouts, all that.
Pinewood Derby.
Yeah, I won the Pinewood Derby one year, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, congrats.
Thank
That's pretty
you.
good.
Thank you. So when I was about 6 years old, my parents got divorced, and, you know, that made it a little difficult, but they both still stayed active in the church and supported me and my siblings. I've got 3 older brothers and a younger sister. So, we pretty much lived with my dad full time, and he was actually raised Episcopal, but, you know, didn't take religion super seriously till he joined the LDS church.
So then after the parents divorced, so you're living with your dad, but you guys are still going to church and just kind of doing the Aaronic priesthood thing? And
yeah, it was kind of interesting, you know, hearing, because like I said, I was about 6 when they got divorced, so, you know, just kind of confused and understand a whole lot of what was going on.
Sure.
But talking to my dad now, when he reflects back on it, he kind of mentions how he had his own sort of crisis and trial of faith, you know, going through a divorce, obviously.
Right.
And, you know, at first he wanted to just take his boys to baseball games on Sundays and go fishing and whatnot. Yeah. But he realized soon that, you know, it was going to be more, it was more important for him to get us to church. So.
Wow. Yeah. So he realizes that, and you've got that, you know, that beginning with your family and its connection to the church. But how did your personal testimony of the gospel grow? How did that develop?
Yeah. You know, I remember vaguely my baptism when I was 8. Yeah. Mainly just the feelings. I remember when I was 12 and doing baptisms for the dead for the first time. I think for me it was interesting having no real pioneer lineage, none of that background in the church. None of my dad's siblings are members or his parents or anything like that. So it was pretty much me, my siblings, my dad, and, you know, my mom separately, but, you know, still as a family unit. And so I think just having the support from those closest to me was really important.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, and so then as you grow and develop, do you remember any particular instances where, you know, where you've prayed or read the Book of Mormon and felt the Spirit?
Yeah. You know, in my childhood, I definitely remember taking scripture study pretty seriously, up until I got into high school, and then it was a little more rebellious.
Yeah.
I didn't love 6 a.m. seminary, but I did graduate.
Nice.
So I don't know of any particular specific instances. I do remember giving some church talks that other members, you know, found kind of impressive, but you know, kind of later on, I sort of thought that was just good public speaking, not necessarily a testimony.
Yeah, that they liked it, right? There was something about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, as we often talk about on the podcast, you know, there are these challenges that come to, you know, our religious faith and to our expectations about religion. So tell us a little bit in your life, how did those challenges come that affected your faith?
Yeah. Well, so when I was 6, like I mentioned, my parents getting divorced. Yeah. When I was 7, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes as well.
Oh, wow.
And it was difficult, but I kind of saw it as a blessing in a way. You know, obviously when I was a kid, it made me irritable and had all the side effects that made it difficult.
Sure.
Learning how to give myself injections when I was a young boy. But I did see it as a blessing in a way that it would allow me to take my health a little bit more seriously. And I kind of knew that any trial God gave me was for me to grow and learn. So as a kid, I was able to have that perspective from a pretty young age. Yeah. And I always kind of say that I grew up a little fast. But as I got older and I graduated high school and my friends, were drinking and smoking weed and partying, that looked a little bit more enticing for me. And so that's when I kind of diverted my path for a bit. So
yeah, so you diverted your path and went that route. And so what was it like for you spiritually during that time? I mean, did you keep going to church, or did you stop going to church? Did you feel like you could keep praying? Like what was it like for you in that time period?
It was hard because I saw everything in kind of black and white. I saw it as either I'm 100% faithful in the church, going every week, have this super strong testimony, or I'm completely the opposite.
Yeah.
And, I think when I was 17 or 18, it was the summer after I graduated high school, I started thinking on my own, and I was supposed to be preparing to go on a mission, and there were some obstacles with health and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, how can I go preach a religion for 2 years if I'm not 100% devoted to it? So at that time, I thought, well, I don't want to be devoted to it. So I kind of removed myself, and I had a discussion with my dad. He noticed that I was kind of distant from the family. I was separating myself a lot. And, he was just expecting me to say, oh, sorry, my blood sugar's been high lately or whatever. And I hit him with a ton of bricks. It was like, hey, so you know how I'm preparing to go on a mission?
Yeah.
Actually, no. And it was really hard for him. And I can only imagine from a father's perspective, just the sadness of putting in so much effort to get your kids to grow their own testimonies and realize the truth of the gospel on their own. And, I completely went away from that, and I just told him I don't have a testimony. I don't want to go to church, and, I'm going to live my life how I want and live it how my friends are. So I know it was particularly hard on my dad, my siblings as well, but, they kind of understood my perspective a little bit at least.
But how good though, I mean, that you could say it and feel free to say that to your dad.
That's true.
And to help him know this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
I mean, and to be that kind of honest with yourself that, hey, this is where I'm at. And it's interesting too, you talk about that 100%, right?
Yeah.
That if I'm not 100%, then I'm out.
Right.
Right. And that's such an interesting, way of looking at it, because that is a really difficult way to live.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying to strive, for something. But that's hard. And so you have that conversation with your dad, and then so for how long are you not involved with the church?
I want to say it was about 2 years.
2 years.
I had a friend that left for his mission around the time that I left the church.
Yeah.
And he came back around the time that I kind of reactivated. So.
Yeah. And what was it that brought you back? I mean, that's the most interesting thing, is that you feel this way. You tell your dad, I'm not going to pray for a mission. I'm just heading out doing my own thing.
Yeah.
And then you're gone, I mean, for 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Like this, and you're living, the way that you want, but something makes you come back. So what's that thing that brings you back?
For me, well, to backtrack a little bit, I had a lot happen in the first year that I kind of decided not to go to church anymore. I, obviously was experimenting outside of church commandments.
Sure.
And so I got a tattoo. I had this motorcycle that I crashed, broke my wrist real bad, and, was lucky to just have that. But, that was just kind of the start of things. I had one of my closest friends, his father passed away in a car accident, and I just remember that like really struck me. And it was interesting because I thought, well, this is my friend's dad. This isn't like my own family member. I wasn't particularly close with his dad or anything,
Right.
but I was very close with him. And I, got a phone call from him and told my dad, hey, I need to go help this friend. Can I use your car? And he said, remember your priesthood. And, at this time I was not involved with church. I
Right.
didn't want to remember my
Yeah.
priesthood. And I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm driving there and just thinking existentially, kind of, thinking about God, if there is a God, if there isn't. And at that time I thought, well, regardless, I need to give my friend some comforting words.
Yeah.
I didn't want to preach any doctrine that I didn't believe in to him, but I told him that I did believe in God and that I hoped, he would find some peace in that, and that his dad would be okay, and that there was potential to see him again. A few weeks later, a mutual friend of me and that same friend passed away on my birthday.
Wow.
It was crazy. I laughed because it was just,
Yeah.
it was so dark. It's you.
Well, that's
Yeah.
some existential questioning right there.
Exactly.
Right? It just keeps coming.
Yeah. And this was just hitting me so hard. I didn't know what to do, and I don't think I prayed then, but a few months later, I was moved out of my house because my dad told me he wanted me to go to church once a month or pay rent. So I said, all right. I went to church once a month for a while, and then I moved out for a bit.
Yeah.
I left, and I did say a prayer at another point when I was kind of having that existential crisis, I guess.
Yeah.
And I felt weird praying because I thought, what if I'm just talking to nobody here? What
Right,
if I'm just
right.
this crazy dude just saying these words out loud, And I didn't feel like I had a definitive answer, but I felt comfort, and I wasn't expecting it. I prayed with the intent of not getting an answer, and I still was able to feel the Spirit.
Wow.
And I wasn't living the commandments, which is, something in our church that we teach is
Yeah.
you receive revelation when you're being obedient.
Right.
And I wasn't, and I still received this answer. So that was kind of the start of things. That happened, like I said, about a year after I decided to stop going to church. And then about a year later, I moved back home with my dad, was going to church once a month like he asked. And I had a discussion with a stake presidency member who was a close friend of the family. And it was in the parking lot when I was leaving right after sacrament.
Yeah.
He had another calling to get to, and he kind of stops in his car,
Yeah.
and he just said to me something along the lines of, hey, you don't have to be 100% devoted to the church to know the basic good principles that it teaches.
Right.
And that was such a simple thing for him to say, but the way he said it, how genuine he was, I could tell that he believed what he was saying, and I thought about it, and on my way home, I kind of cried a little bit and thought, wow, I think, I told myself, there may not be a God, but even if there isn't, if I live my life believing that there is, I'm going to be a lot happier and a lot better off, and I'm going to do a lot more good in this world than the other, than the opposite.
Right.
So.
Well, and that's really interesting because you have that experience, and then it's a year, right?
Yeah.
Even a year after that, after the prayer. And what's interesting is the member of the stake presidency actually explains to you why that prayer worked, right? Even if you weren't living the way that you should, it's the fact that God loves you, and desires that you be happy and that you draw closer unto Him, and so He's going to help you with that. Right, along that path. And so from that point with the stake president, did things just sort of grow bit by bit in terms of your testimony and your activity with the church?
Yeah. I had a lot of little experiences that, when I look back, seem so significant, but at the moment they were insignificant.
Right.
Just seeing friends from church that I knew when I was a teenager, just at random places, at school and stuff, it was just kind of a reminder, like, oh, hey, I know them from church, and so there's just like a little link there. My brother at the time was going to school here, and I came up to visit him, as well as my wife Lily. We had started dating a little bit, and she told me that we met online, and she told me that she was going here at BYUI, and I kind of scoffed and was like, oh, okay. And I think I even said, like, oh, you're a Mormon girl. Okay, like, I've never dated a Mormon girl.
Right.
I said something like that. And then I came up here to visit my brother and visit Lily, and I just had, massive spiritual impressions up here that I wasn't seeking or ready to receive at all. And so I prayed really sincerely, and I don't even remember what I read. I want to say it was in Alma.
Yeah.
And I prayed, and as I prayed, I asked God, if the church was true, if my testimony from when I was a kid was true.
Yeah.
I asked him if I needed to go to school here and if I needed to date Lily. And that was the first time in my life that I felt like I received very vivid, clear revelation.
Yeah.
I hadn't used the term revelation a lot in my life prior to that, but I kind of prayed and sort of saw images in my own mind, and felt these impressions that all of those things were true, that I needed to go to school here and that I needed to date and marry Lily.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Yeah. All those things start to build, right? And build that testimony.
Yeah.
So, one final question as you look back and think about, your life up to now and the experiences that you've had, what advice would you give to a younger person and maybe just to anybody who's listening about that feeling and that need to be, always at 100%?
Yeah. I would say something that I've learned personally is our gospel is so much about personal growth and personal revelation and your personal relationship with God.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get caught up in the culture more so than the gospel, and that creates kind of these false ideas about the church in our minds, I think. If you know someone that's a member of the church who acts a certain way, that's not a direct reflection of what the gospel teaches.
Right.
And I mean, that goes both ways. So I would say do a lot of personal seeking. Don't look at it as, I need to be a good, worthy church member or whatever, so that I set a good example for my kids to be good, worthy church members. Think of it first as I need to find out if this is true and know if this gospel is right for me for my own personal growth.
Right.
And if you feel that that's true, then yes, obviously you want to set good examples for your family and friends and whoever. But,
right. Well, and most likely you will be a good example.
Yeah.
Right? If you focus on what's internal first before the external.
Right.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Logan.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being here.
Uh-huh.